All right, good evening. It is 5:31. It is Thursday, August the 5th, and this is our pre-agenda meeting for August for the Town of Spencer Board of Aldermen. With that, if you will please bow your head for the Pledge of Allegiance, or for the invocation. Father, we thank you for our many blessings. We thank you for this evening. We thank you for our town. We thank you for the residents. Help us as a board that we may do your will for our citizens, making our community a better place for each one of them. We ask that you be with our staff as they are in the line of duty with their work each and every day. We thank you for the tireless gifts that they and talents that they bring to our town and to our residents. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, we've got a few things. Purpose of tonight's meeting is to set our agenda for next Tuesday. I do want to provide a reminder that we will have a public hearing on Monday night of next week. That public hearing is at 5 p.m., correct, Peter? Be for the purpose of considering changes to the town charter relative to election terms and moving towards a staggered term for our mayor and board starting in 2023. All right. I will not be present for that. Mayor Pro Tem, I will be joining by Zoom. Mayor Pro Tem will be leading the meeting in my virtual absence. Okay. And so with that, Peter, I'll turn it over to you. I think you have a few things that you want to provide as potential additions to the agenda for Tuesday night, and then a couple other items I think that you want to provide updates on tonight, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. So the three items that we will request to be added to the agenda for Tuesday would be one that we found out that Cindy Saferett with the CCAP program and the 17th Street project is going to provide an update on Tuesday to us. Joel's reported that she's got another set of 80% plans reflecting some of the feedback from the last time. And she's also said that those are going to be available on Monday, that we'll be able to provide them to you all in advance so you could take a look and then hopefully have a fairly concise presentation on Tuesday to go over the update. The two other things are we'd like to add to the agenda a resolution for you to consider in recognition of August the 21st through 28th as Creek Week in Spencer and Rowan County.
August 21st and what?
August 21st through 28th. And so we would like to add that to the agenda. We do have a flyer there on the table if you're interested in a variety of the events that will be going on that week. They'll be going on around the whole county. We will have events here in Spencer at the River Park area on Sunday the 22nd, and then on Thursday the 26th there will be a wood duck box presentation building demonstration at the Standback Educational Forest. And Mayor Williams, if you want to add anything else to any of that, we'll talk about next week.
The Land Trust is also sponsoring an event on, I believe, that Tuesday,
23rd.
the 23rd, and they'll be doing a guided nature walk.
Yes.
In Standback Forest. Yeah.
Sure. So, and anybody who's tuning in and wants to check out the variety of events, if you go to RowanCreekWeek.org, you can see the full listing of events. It's a really neat variety of things that you can get involved with as part of that celebration. And then the third thing is we've got an update related to our events here in Spencer. Of course, we had the cruise in June, and the group that's been working on that is working towards another big event in October. And then there's another group that kind of spun off from that's gotten going on putting together what's called Winterfest. That's going to be planned for the first 2 Fridays and Saturdays in December. And that group would like to use some of our event funding to create an events website for Spencer. And we've got some information we'd like to talk with you about that on Tuesday. But one of the things I'll mention is there's been an organization here in town known as the Spencer Partnership. And it appears that the work of this group and what we were referring to last year as hometown holidays is really tied in with what was the Spencer Partnership. And those people are looking into how to get that Spencer Partnership group going again. And that's something that Sky Allen, our fellow that I'll introduce you to in just a few minutes, like to get Sky involved in that process as well. But talk more about that on Tuesday. But we've got a neat idea related to an events website for bringing activity and visitors to Spencer.
Okay.
So
Those are the 3 additions?
those are the additions.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. All right then. So with that, we will start with a review of our agenda. I guess, is there anything else from the board that we need to consider adding to the agenda at this point? Okay.
Can't think of anything.
Okay. All right. Very good. Recognitions. Are there recognitions that we would like to make as a board on Tuesday night?
We need to recognize what happened last night as far as that goes.
Tuesday night?
Tuesday night.
Yeah, that was great.
Mr. Miller, would you like to make that recognition?
Well, how about our?
Sure, I'll do it.
I mean, you're more involved than I do. Do you mind?
No.
You know more about the people than I do.
And I would like to thank the local government federal credit union for the shred event today. I took boxes and boxes of stuff to shred.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right. Any other recognitions? Okay. Very good. Do you want to introduce Sky at this point, or do you want to?
I would like to, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Sky, why don't you come on up and you can say hello. But we've got a new member of the team, Sky Allen, who joined us on Monday of this week. Sky is serving in Spencer as a Lead for North Carolina Fellow, one of 24 young people across the state of North Carolina doing a year of service in small towns and rural communities. And she is in the 3rd cohort of this program. And this year, the program is a partnership of the UNC School of Government and a new entity that's supported this program this year is AmeriCorps. So she's actually doing a year of service through AmeriCorps as part of this program. We're really glad to have her. The goal is to bring capacity to our team, give the fellow experience in a future career in public service and expose her to a lot of different things. And so we're excited to have her. And Sky, if you'd like to add anything else, just want to say welcome.
Thank you. Very kind. Just that I am very excited to be here. I seem to have come in at a very exciting point in Spencer's history, and I hope to do the best I can to propel it forward. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Very good. Welcome aboard. All right. We will move on as we consider the agenda items. Just remember that anything we want to place on consent agenda, if you'll just let me know. And so with that, our minutes from July the 8th and July the 13th. All right, Ms. Sledge wants to move that to consent. Everybody in agreement with that?
Right.
Okay. All right. Before we move to item 8, that is specifically related to the ordinance to amend the town charter based on the public hearing for Monday night. I would suggest that at this point, right after our consent agenda item approval, that we go ahead and do our presentations from Ms. Safrit and the update from the Spencer Partnership, so that we do not make them have to wait too far into our meeting to give those presentations. You in agreement with that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we will, I would say, let's go ahead and let the Spencer Partnership do their update first, and then Cindy Safrit from the CCAP program immediately after her. Everybody in agreement?
Let me mention one thing before, so I don't forget it.
Yes.
Evan Boss at Boss Pools
Yeah.
wants to be involved with the Winterfest. So
Okay.
She wants to be sure that, you know, they know about, that they have an opportunity to participate in that.
Perfect. We will connect them with the group leading that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, very good. And then next item is the ordinance. I would also suggest that immediately after the 2 updates, we go ahead and approve the resolution for Creek Week immediately following that. Board okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then we'll have the ordinance 21-016 to amend the town charter for the purpose of staggered 4-year terms for alderman and mayor. And then item 9, which will move to item, what, 12? We will have an update from the Police Chief Citizen Advisory Board.
Is that our presentation?
Yes.
And then item 13 will be an ordinance adopting a budget amendment for Standback Forest, attachment 4. Item 14 will be adopting a budget ordinance for the Yadkin River Trailhead, and all these are relative to funding sources that have come in, correct, Peter?
That's correct. On the one is a $10,000 grant that was received that we had previously applied for from the Blanche and Julian Robertson Family Foundation for the Standback Forest. And then we also have $100 from Friends of Rowan for Yadkin River Trailhead.
So would those be items that the board would want to move to the consent agenda?
Sure.
Yeah. It sounds like we got a
Yeah.
full schedule anyway.
Yes.
And with the new presentations, we're getting ready to.
Right. All right, so then item 13 then will be our departmental reports. And with that, Peter, anything tonight from a departmental report update?
Yeah, if Joel Taylor would like to come up, we did receive some information related to the pavement evaluation process that there is some information in your packet, and the full materials were provided to you via email in terms of you should have received a link to a GIS map and some more detailed information. And so if Joel could provide that update to the board and see if we can address any initial questions about it, and we could explore that in more depth going forward. But since we did receive that, we thought tonight might be a good introduction to it. If Joel, just make sure you got the microphone in. I could let you use this mic stand here, and you can. All right.
In your packets is the actual numerical list, which is that goes with the map that was sent out, the GIS map. So they kind of coincide with. There's no color coding or anything, but the colors on the map do show You know, I think it goes red. I'm not sure what all the colors are, but it's red. It's very good because you can look, as you blow up the map, you can match it to these. And it'll tell you, what's in poor shape, what's not.
Just for the board looking for this information, it's in section 6 after the public works report. So it's right before the finance report in the packet in section 6.
And not to dive in too deep, but as you look through the list, I went in and sorted it to where it put all the worst ones at the front. The list came to me kind of matching more of the map, and I put it in an order where it's actually easier for me to read, which would be, and what it does is it gives us a list, 0 being the worst, 100 being the best. So it goes from 0. Now, as you look through your list, after Lee Street, Grant Street, 10th Street, when you get into the Rowan, well, you won't have the Rowan Street because that one's different. But 6th Street, say 75, 76, all the way through 87 are gravel roads. So they're not really into a pavement consideration, just so you know. They're all the gravel streets in town, and they're going to remain gravel until, you know, we inquire to do an improvement. So, so the first ones that you see, over half of the zeros are gravel roads. So don't let it kind of skew you a little bit as far as how many we have that are 0. You know, they're terrible shape. So, but this will be the list that we will be working off of. Going forward, as funding becomes, you know, Powell bill funding becomes available to fix it, we'll start with the number 1 and work our way down the list. And as we improve them, we can go in and change the ranking, and then then it'll put it to the bottom. So once we pave something, we just go in and change the ranking back to 100, and then it goes to the bottom.
So you're gonna start at number 24, or is that what you're saying?
Lee Street East is the first one, and then Grant Street and then 10th Street would be your first 3.
Okay.
Those are the first 3 on the list.
And then these streets that were in blue, they're down in Yadkin Village, is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct. They are
Do we take care of those?
part of those streets we do. They did incorporate that as far as, I guess it was with the finishing company property. So some of those are considered municipal streets. Those are ones that we can get into depending on how much development goes on, down in that area. If we see a need that we can or not, we can jump those, you know what I mean? There's ways to work around that.
Yeah.
But some of those are municipal streets. Some of them are state roads, and then some of them are actually county roads. So kind of gets a little confusing on there, but
And I think the key there is whatever we do will have to be coordinated with the county and the state with what their plans are, but we really need to wait with those until we know with the finishing company site what's going to happen there. I always hate it when we repave roads and then you immediately have a stormwater project or a wastewater project, and you have to tear it up. So.
exactly, and it could be, you know, the development of that property could reroute those roads completely.
Right.
So they may be tearing them up and moving them, and there's no need to put money into pavement till we know for sure what's happening in that area. That'll be one whole project, I feel sure.
I looked at a home down there before I bought mine, so
Yeah.
that's how I know that's where they are.
Right.
So FID means what, John? On top,
On top.
the first column.
Really have no idea.
These are street segments, so they must have given like an identification number to each segment that got a rating, I assume. And
I would assume that that's where the 24, 31, they come into an actual, you know, their number that coincided with what the ranking that they had. Now, something I will explain, if you look to the right where it says this begin description and end description, that gets a little confusing, or it did for me. I'll tell you, because what it does, it's by block. Okay, so it's going to tell you from where it starts to where it ends. So just because it says, we'll say 10th Street, that's only from Iredale to Spencer. It's just one block. That's the worst. You get what I'm saying? So it's just because of that.
there's another segment of 10th Street on third page, number 34, that's got a rating of 50, you know, another segment. So, and that's where the map starts to be helpful, I'd say.
Right, and that's what I was gonna suggest, is we work to prioritize these. It's one of those things that if you've got a 0 and you've got a 50, but they're right side by side, it makes sense to go ahead and
Do both.
do all
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I was gonna explain that. When the paving contractors come in, it's the more you mobilize, the more it costs you. So if you can scrunch, you know, and they don't mind a block here or a block there, but if you go from one side of town to the other side of town, they're gonna charge you to do that. So the more you can compact into one spot, like Mayor was saying, you know, even one's a 0 and one's a 50, get them both while you're there. You know what I mean? Take them both off the list, because you'll get the 2 cheaper than you'll get just the 1.
And the other thing we want to do, I think, is make sure we're using that map so that if there are particular blocks in a particular area that are hot spots for bad roads,
Right,
that's where we're focusing that paving effort in for a given year.
correct.
Was the
I
map
agree.
linked to, was the map linked in the agenda packet, or is it?
It's,
was it separate?
I had separately
Peter
provided
sent a
that in
separate
last week's
email.
update.
Oh, okay. I
but
think
if-
I missed the map,
If
so.
it would be helpful to send it out again separately, happy to do
It
that.
was in Friday's email
Yes.
update.
Okay. I can
Yeah, it was
find
in
it.
Friday's.
So
Yeah, and you just click on it, it's pop, you know, it'll pop up, but it's gonna look really weird to you at first, but you're gonna have to start zooming in. And then the more you zoom, the more it'll pop into your streets.
So the this contractor was was requested to report on the condition of the pavement in the town.
Correct.
But are they and their recommendation for the cure of those conditions is to repave, or are we getting into a situation where some of the streets may need to be reconstructed?
That's a possibility. When you get into 0s, I think at that point, then the contractor makes the recommendation of what to do with the street. If it is a reconstruction where you mill it down, start over, or whether you know, take it down to a gravel base and start over, that would be up to the contractor to decide what's best for that street. We would just be starting with the lowest ranking and working our way down the list.
Right, because I was observing that in Salisbury, one of those streets that was just redone, where apparently they just they just poured over the existing pavement and made a new striping and stuff like that.
Right.
But what happens is that now you have a situation where the depth of the distance between the top of the pavement and a person's property is like an inch. So you're gonna get flooding coming over it.
Yeah.
Whereas if they had milled it like they were supposed
Right.
to, you get that 3 or 4 inches or whatever it
Correct.
is down it. So, so do we know at what we're gonna do on this situation? Are we gonna look at condition of the road itself before we determine whether we're gonna pave or reconstruct or what?
Well, that, like I said, that would be up to the contractor. When we go into this, most of the time, if there's concrete drives, any kind of permanent drive that comes through the road, we always mill the driveways. That way it ties in, it makes it look a lot better, plus you don't have the water running into somebody's driveway, so it makes a big difference. If there's curb lines, you always mill. You want the water to stay in the curb, not in the street. So if you pave into the gutter, it's not doing you any good. So, and you're wasting asphalt, in my opinion. too.
Yeah. But in this situation, it was neither. I mean, they didn't have curbs,
Okay.
and it wasn't a driveway, but it was someone's the exterior of their property.
Okay. So they just
Now
built the shoulder up.
yeah, now it's like a 1 inch, less than a 1 inch difference between the height of the road and that property. So water's it's gonna come up over it. You know, so I'm hoping that we don't get in, I mean, we got a lot of hills and water's running all over people's properties over here, and you know, from all different places. And if we can't channel them to where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, and so a lot of that, as Joe was saying, with whether you mill it down, reconstruct it, or you overlay it, really depends on, has it been overlaid before?
Mhm.
Usually when they're designed that you can overlay it at least once or twice. What we're gonna get into though, I think, and we see it, we have to mill quite often.
Oh, yes.
Like you say, where we do have curbs, we have to mill.
Even
And
the
then
stone curb.
I can guarantee you where where there are these zeros, we're gonna have to mill.
Mm-hmm.
Because just to get it to where, I mean, those are places where you have a lot of potholes and things like that. And so you've got to kind of basically take it down to nothing and reconstruct those. You know, and Bob, to your point, the other thing with the flooding and stormwater drainage issues, like on the type of street you're talking about, that really comes down more to the actual ditches, and are they being maintained, right? And so that's one of the things we have to look at from our perspective, is making sure that, you know, we're not, when we're adding onto it, that we're, you know, not raising that elevation, but more so that we're maintaining the ditch lines and everything like that, and getting DOT to come out and maintain the ones that they're responsible for.
Right.
So
Agreed.
I would say more often than not in town, we are having to mill. Would you
Oh,
agree with that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Even on the older stone curbs, we're getting to the point to where we're only getting like that much curb. So
Yeah.
we're actually double milling in the curb lines and then paving back to them and giving us back a 4-inch curb. But the milling's cheap in the realm of the process. Milling's the cheapest part. Asphalt laying it's the hardest part, or the most expensive. So,
My bigger concern on some of these that have such a low pavement rating is the actual subsurface.
subsurface.
And
And there'll be places we'll
roadbed
have to
condition.
dig and, you know, put binder underneath and stuff like that.
Right.
If the pavement's actually worth saving.
Right.
You know, and, you know, there's some areas that it may not be.
Yeah.
You just have to mill it down, gravel it, and start over.
I do want to prepare the board though, because we're going with this approach and it's somewhat different than we've been doing. There is a high likelihood that we're not going to be able to do as much early on as far as the length of paving that we're able to do, because it's going to be more expensive with some of these up front. But I think it's something we need to do, because we've got to get our roads back up to a standard, kind of a standard level of care with how we're maintaining our streets.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
just
Thank you
be
for saying
prepared for that. As we work through this list, eventually we'll start getting a lot more done when we get on a routine cycle, but we're starting behind. We're
Right.
gonna have to work to make that up.
Yeah, once we get to about the 50 level, then we'll start getting some length.
Yep.
Because there'll be just spots that have to be
Long
fixed.
way.
You know what I mean? It's a long way, I understand. And, you know, but, you know, some places have been neglected, and it's time that those areas need to be caught up. And,
I know in the past, some of these streets got paved because some of the people sitting on this board wanted it paved because it ran in front of their house. And that's not right. And everybody deserves the good streets. And I think this is the fair way to treat the streets.
agree.
I don't think anybody can argue about it. They might not be first in line, but they'll be in line.
You're in line.
Agree.
That's right.
'Cause that's very much true.
I guess one question I have, what can we do to communicate this to our citizens so that they understand that this is kind of the new process going forward and why we're doing it?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think we can I think we have to refine this list a little bit to perhaps make it a little more user friendly. And there's more information in the data than what's in front of you, and there's more specifics on the condition. I think some of that stuff lends into what the treatment is, and I think some of that, you know, will be where we can start to decide how we put the bid specs together. You know, I think, I don't know that we just say, here's 3 streets, how are we going to fix them? I think we can try to put together something where we know we may have to have a full depth treatment in some areas, a resurfacing in some. There may be more of a patching and sealing in some, and how do we get the most for our money? And so, yeah, talking about that whole process is something we definitely want to do, and likely a future newsletter topic.
And I was gonna say, the next step of this, now that we have this information, is actually putting together the paving plan. And the long-range plan. It's not just next year's plan, it's here's the range of what we think we're gonna tackle year by year, at least for the next 5 years. But even longer term, really, if we can come up with a plan for how we're going to get all our streets below 50 to 50 or above, and what that time frame looks like, I think that's gonna be important. And it's somewhat of a guess, because we don't know what we don't know from year to year what our power bill allocation is gonna be. We don't know what asphalt prices and installation is gonna be from year to year,
Correct.
but we can at least make an educated plan.
Right.
Quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that the town has been pretty quick to address people's, issues when they have potholes,
Yes,
for
ma'am.
instance, in front of their home.
Mhm.
Will that still be going on? Will that be
Yes,
like a?
yes,
okay,
yeah,
but we need to let
that's
people know
completely
that
separate
too.
than this. This is just for your
Okay, that's what I
overall
thought.
paving.
I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
wanted to make sure.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, one little point of context. Something that needs to also be considered, especially in my neck of the woods, all over in Forestdale, and something I've always argued about. The streets on Pinecroft and Forestdale, my street, Crestwood, have been repaired so many times because of broken water mains. And I hate to see you spend money on those streets
That's true.
without considering what's below those streets, because that water mains, and Randy will tell you the same thing, they need to be replaced. And I fussed at this board when I was not a member that we needed to get those lines replaced. So some of these streets, even though I live near it, I think you need to consider that as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Anytime that we do a paving project, Salisbury Row Inn is one of the first people we contact. If they have any expansion plans, or if they have any plans to upgrade, before we do any kind of paving. Because the worst thing in the world is to put pavement down and have to cut a hole in it. It's a known fact. It's gonna happen.
If they just come through and remarked water meters, spaces.
Did they?
Uh-huh.
Some areas, they've been changing some of the meters out because they've had some issues with them, but
They've been
I don't
changing
know
out
anything
meter
about any
boxes.
marking
Okay, well, mine,
unless
I
they've
think
done
mine's
some
just
boxes.
been remarked, because I couldn't find it last year.
They just marked it on this road with a blue line, so
Right.
that when they read the meter, or when they need somebody, like if a contractor comes out and wants to cut your water off, they'll know, they can look at the street and say, hey, the meter's right there in front of that blue mark, and that helps out everybody else. It's especially true when the leaves are down and you can't find meter boxes.
Coming from the corner. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Another thing to consider with those water lines over in the area Steve's talking about, sometimes that impacts the schools over there. Now, I've been in the schools when they have no water. That is not a pleasant place to be. Because all of a sudden, everyone has to go to the restroom.
Oh, yes.
And I know one time they had to shut the schools down, and the first thing I did was go over the bridge and go to East Spencer and go to the restroom. Because I couldn't even go home to go to the restroom. So, but when you're in a school with 600 or 700 kids, no matter what age,
They did some rerouting a couple years
Yeah.
ago and put some extra valves in
good.
that'll actually secure water to the schools.
Good,
It's
good.
made it better. It's made it a lot
Good.
better. When I first got here, it was like every other week
Oh.
it was closing the school down,
It
but
was
now they've
awful.
got it fixed. So. Okay. If you have any other questions, and when you look at the information that was sent, I only printed part of it because it would be it's about this long, but all of the areas that they graded it on are included. So you can look at whether it's alligator cracking or potholes or, shelving, anything like that. They graded the 10 criteria that they used. It's in there and it'll tell you what their score was. So when you look at the full thing, you just have to extend it out. It's a little complicated.
And that will help Joel kind of work to define the treatment too,
Mhm.
based on the specific type
Right.
of damage.
And some of them, they actually gave me depth, which was really good. That's very helpful. If they could get to an edge, they could give me
Right.
depth. But
Right.
if there was a curb, then of course I can't. And they didn't core drill. So.
Well, one last question, Joe. Now,
Yes, sir.
These are all town streets, right?
Yes.
Correct.
what about the state roads? Are we gonna do those at the same time, or are we gonna have the state
Yeah,
work
that'll-
around?
The
when
state does their own pavement rating system.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things where we get on the list when the state says we're on the list to repave.
They
Of
actually
course, they are
asked,
gonna repave some areas.
yeah, they actually asked for some input on some areas in town, state roads. That is, 7th and 3rd have been done,
Right.
not recently, but within the last while, so they're not horrible. We put in for their portion of Charles Street and Oakwood this year, were the two that I put in for. So now, there
So-
again, it's still their decision on whether they make, they want us to, or they're gonna do it. But that's the two areas I put in for this year on the state roads.
No,
Because I know 29 is a project in itself and it's coming.
yeah.
But 7th, 3rd have been done. So those are the other two most traveled state roads in town. So, especially for the schools.
Right.
And if they'll fix their part of Charles, then we'll get in that conversation again about whether we
Well,
want
we
it or
want
not.
to take the road over as far as that goes.
But they gotta fix their portion first.
Absolutely.
I'm not taking it as is, no way.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's good. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Good.
Thanks,
Thank
Very
Joe.
good. If you have any questions, let Peter know or myself or whatever, we'll get back with you. Okay?
Great.
All right, thank you.
All right. So then we'll move on. Item 14 will be the town manager report. We have, item 15 will be considering adopting resolution 21-016, which establishes the Salisbury Avenue Corridor Improvement Grant. Anything you want to mention on that this evening?
Nope, you'll get a presentation next week from Kyle on this, but you will recall as part of the budget an enhanced level of funding for the facade grant program, and this is the policy recommendation to go along with that to reimagine what has been the facade grant program.
Okay, very good. And then item 16 will be considering an appointment of a nominee to the Historic Preservation Committee. My understanding is that is the one open spot that we currently have. All right, and that would be Joshua James. And is Mr. James going to be able to be with us on Tuesday?
Yes, and I actually wanted to ask the board what y'all's pleasure was with regard to how we wanted to do that.
Uh-huh.
So as you saw in the materials that I provided, the HPC chair, Jacqueline Jensen, and I and the applicant met twice to conduct 2 formal interviews. She's very impressed with the candidate. She wrote a letter of recommendation that we've included with y'all's materials. Joshua and the HPC chair will be here at the meeting, but I wanted to ask you how you wanted to approach that. My recommendation would be to not do any sort of interview during the meeting.
Right.
Those have already been conducted. My recommendation would be to allow Joshua and or Jacqueline to provide just a brief statement summarizing the interview that they had and sort of leave it at that. But I wanted to ask y'all what would your input be?
That was my thinking, but it's up to the board what you would prefer.
Kind of like what you're saying.
I think an introduction, just basically like everybody else.
I do like the idea of making sure that the nominees are here
Right.
and can introduce themselves and speak to us so that we get a chance to
Yeah.
meet them.
You're on the board. What do you suggest?
Oh, I don't know anything about this actually. To be perfectly honest,
What?
I didn't know anything.
Well, there you
about
go.
the
Now you know.
interview, or
They keep you in the dark.
Are you still a member of the
like
board?
mushroom. Keep you in the dark and pop shit on you. Yeah. But
That's what
I didn't know anything
I
about
was
it,
gonna say
Kyle,
it.
so I thought we had worked out a process on how we handle suggestions for appointments to committees, and I never heard of an interview process, a private interview process.
It would probably have gone a little bit differently if our boards and commissions had met in July. We probably would have brought it before the HPC for some level of analysis. But I felt that Jacqueline, during our interviews, had pretty much gone through the process that we thought was appropriate, and now we're going to bring it to y'all for a final decision.
It's fine. Well, I would think some point along the way that you have it go through other members of the commission before you do that.
In the board, with all respect, I believe we had a similar conversation to this several months back, and there was some analysis of do committees as a group appoint their own membership or approve or not, and I believe we determined that it's the prerogative of this board of aldermen to do so.
Right.
To do what? To what?
To make appointments.
Right. It's our board that ultimately makes the appointment.
So we approved them.
We
They recommend, they
we
make a
approve, but I'm
recommendation,
talking about the recommendation process.
but we
How
approve
does
it
that
as far as
happen?
that goes.
I don't think that. I think what we had said before, as usual, I think we're talking about a planning board appointment, was that it would go. The name would come from
The chair.
the chairman of that commission, I mean, of that committee, and he would, as a result of him meeting the appointee or designee, meeting before that committee, the recommendation, if it was approved by the committee, that it would then go to the board, and then the board would decide on whether he's approved or not. I don't think that happened in this case.
So thinking back several months when we brought forward a planning board appointment, I think that's what initiated the initial conversation about how board appointments were done. We never really settled on a final decision on how that would work. So at the staff level, what we determined was, in this case, we would have 2 formal interviews. The HPC chair would write a letter of recommendation, and then we would present it to the board. If in future this board believes that we should have an additional step where the HPC itself meets with the candidate and interviews the candidate and makes a recommendation, we can certainly do that. But I think it is usually in municipalities, it's the pleasure of the governing board to make the appointment. And what you want to avoid is having boards and commissions that self-select their membership just as a level of basic governance. That's not a best practice. But we can certainly have that discussion if we need to have the board itself interview the candidate. We can do that. I'd be more than happy to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm at a point where I think I've said already what I needed to say, and I'll leave it at that.
Other thoughts from the rest of the board?
I know when I was on the Historic Preservation Commission, they called me and asked me if I would consider it. And they asked me if I would come up here and fill out an application. And then I went through the process that he's explaining, came up here and they introduced me and everything. And the board is the one that
Made the
made the appointment, yes. But that might have changed, but I imagine, do the other committees have applications or things for people to fill out if they're interested?
Yeah.
That's what I would think.
They do.
So,
They all do.
You don't have that in your constitution that you proposed here several months ago. Anything about how you did that as far as that goes?
There is not. Usually the appointment process is, typically it's actually done through the clerk's office. And the way it works is any citizen can find the board application online, submit it to Stacy. Stacy would then submit it to me. I would go through a basic process of calling the candidate, doing a first basic interview over the phone to make sure that they meet the minimum qualifications. For planning board members, for example, you have to demonstrate a certain level of experience in planning and things like that. For historic preservation, you have to have a certain level of experience in preservation, architecture, history. Then what I will do is I will schedule a meeting with the chair of the board, and we will sit down with the candidate once or twice, conduct that formal interview, then the chair will write a letter of recommendation that we'll submit to the governing board. Usually, and my experience in Salisbury is none of their boards and commissions pre-screen the candidates beyond the chair making a recommendation. But if we need to alter that process, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, so I think we as a board need to provide Kyle with some very concrete guidance on what we want the process moving forward to be.
Really, I don't want to get involved with the Historic Society as far as that goes. I really think it's up to their board to decide who they want to recommend. And then it's our responsibility to vote on this particular person. I don't think we should be involved in who is on these different boards as far as they go.
Well, and see, I tend to disagree with that because, you know, our board, we are the ones that are ultimately setting guidance and policy, and part of those boards fall under all of that. And so, you know, that is one of our prerogatives as a board, is to make those appointments. I think what we were getting into last time when we reviewed this was making sure that those boards did have some level of input, whether it was the chair, because I think the last situation we got into, the chair didn't even know about it. And it was basically just an application that was then passed along to
Don't
the
need
board.
that. That's for
That's
sure.
not what we want, where
No.
somebody applies and then just comes directly to
No,
our
we don't
board.
need that.
We do want them vetted in some capacity with our boards. And so I guess my question to you is, what is that vetting capacity that we want from all of our boards? And it needs to be consistent across all of them.
So I guess my question is, had you had the meeting in July instead of, not meeting because of the summer, would you have, brought that individual on and
I would have
introduced him
yes.
to the committee and gotten input from them?
I probably would have considered it, and I would have asked Jacqueline Jensen if that was something that she was so willing to spend time at the commission meeting on. But unfortunately, we didn't meet in July, so that's not the process that played out.
Right.
I do think the process that happened in this case followed the feedback that we had at the time, and it is the authority for appointments is bestowed on you, the Board of Aldermen, and so I think keeping that in mind, of course, we want to facilitate the process you see fit. And this process kind of represents it does allow the input from the board chairs without having a formal a vote on it per se from the appointed board.
So Kyle, so how many commission members are aware of this candidate's request to be part of the board that they sit on?
Jacqueline Jensen is aware, and unless she contacted anyone else on the board, no one else would be aware.
So it sounds like there's just a communication breakdown from the chair and the members of that board. But it sounds like everybody's still on the same page. I'm with him. But you're still saying the same thing he's saying too. Just have it where those guys do it. And just because there was an absence of a month where you weren't able to meet, it's the reason why it went this way. Let's not forget, everybody, this is a civic duty. It's not a job.
Right.
So if this guy, Joshua James came in and he's willing to do it, I know where I'm at right about now. I'm not running again. This is a civic duty. It's not my job. I'm not trying to say let's not be concerned about how these processes work. And we do need to make it consistent when it comes to these boards, whether it's planning board and historic board. But I'm just saying, and you know now, Kyle, coming in here, reference to bringing a Joshua James, that let that board and make sure that Jacqueline Jensen, who's the chair, make sure she communicates with her members, just like the way Jonathan usually communicates with us sometimes before we have these meetings, kind of thing. So it's just the responsibility and the roles of everybody, what they do. Nobody did anything wrong, so you're okay. No harm, no foul.
I agree.
Well, the only additional comment I would add is I very much understand where Mr. Bish you're coming from. I suppose thinking back on my thought process would be, if we're not giving the board members, the Historic Preservation Commission members, any formal role in the decision-making process, the most I could do is provide a courtesy note that this is happening. But unless we're providing them a formal role in the decision-making process, whether it be an interview with the full board or a formal vote on whether or not to proceed to forward this application to the governing board, then I guess what I'm saying is we need to clarify whether or not the HPC does have a formal role in reviewing this application.
The way I see it, I mean, I don't think it should be a courtesy. I think it should be a process, and I think it should be a process that's that we all agree that we're going to follow, and that we stick to it. I don't think it's good if you have you're trying to bring someone onto someone's team, and you don't even talk to the team. And I don't know this person from a can of paint. Whether he's good, bad, or whatever. All I know that I heard about, there was an appointment at the candidate's house, and then another appointment at town hall, and that none of the other commission members were privy to appointments taking place, or may not have any knowledge of even the candidate wanted to be on it. I mean, suppose there was an individual on the commission that had a conflict or had a problem with that particular individual, and they could provide you some input. Regardless of what kind of knowledge this person is bringing, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about trying to bring somebody onto someone's team and not letting the team know until the person just shows up in the locker room one day. That's all I'm saying.
If I may add an analogy, of course, you, the Board of Aldermen, are a team, and you are selected by the voters without really considering each other.
Yeah, that won't work.
But the
That doesn't fit your argument, does it?
The voters did have a chance to vet us.
yes, and so just as a voter votes for the alderman, you, the alderman, are the appointing authority for the appointed boards. So that's where staff was coming from. We would like direction. We understand your point, but just that was where this process came from, was just out of where the appointing authority lies for all the boards.
Well, the biggest complaint I hear from citizens about government, state, local, national, is that it's so cumbersome. And sometimes we do need to streamline things when we have somebody that's willing to volunteer. And thank you for doing that. I couldn't wait till my term on HPC was over. It was a lot more than I expected. But, sometimes when we have someone that's willing to serve, I think we need to move on and, after we've they've been interviewed and applied, filled out their forms and whatever, move on it as quickly as we can. And get them working.
So that being the case, I mean, let me make a suggestion, and Bob, feel free to correct me if you feel otherwise. I think, at a minimum moving forward, we've set this process where they will interview with you as well as the chair of whatever appointed board it is. And I think, though, at a minimum, the step that needs to happen is, if there's a recommendation going to be made to our board, that each of those appointed board members are notified of it and have a chance, just like we're going to have a chance, to meet that person in advance of that coming to our board.
Maybe that step should be reversed, where the person comes forward, fills out the application, and, he's vetted, but then the committee gets that information before the interview. because that way you wouldn't be setting up expectations of somebody who you've interviewed and have the commission or the committee or whatever say, no, I don't think that guy's gonna work with us.
Right.
So, I don't know.
You can also look at it from the candidate side. He might not be comfortable, once he sees who's on the board, he might not be comfortable,
Right.
or she might not be comfortable working with these people. So it's either way you want to go. I really think it's the board's recommendation, and I do think Bob's kind of right. I think everybody on that board should have at least a little knowledge of wants to be on that board. And the more communication, the better. Nobody's gonna fight.
Yeah, again, though, I think we want to make sure that we're very clear in our role as a board, that we are not going to be letting our appointed boards tell our board what to do.
Oh, yeah.
Those
Oh, no,
appointed boards are
No,
to
no,
provide
no,
no.
feedback
No.
and input. And so I
No,
think we
can't
need to
do
be
that.
clear about that, and make sure
No.
that that process
No, that's not gonna
reflects
happen.
that.
With the committee's responsibility to recommend to the board,
Yeah.
but also with the understanding and knowing that the board doesn't have to accept their recommendation.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. Clear as mud, right?
Well,
Sorry, but yeah.
it does sound that y'all are evolving towards a formal interview with the full commission. And that's something I can facilitate moving forward.
No one said a formal commitment, because I mean, I think through this year alone, even with the COVID and everything else, we've been having problems getting people to come onto our boards, period.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes we can grab them off the street if they're willing to come in and work with the board. All I'm saying is that the process of doing that, of trying to get somebody, and no one said that he had to have any expertise in planning and architectural styling and stuff like that. You're saying that. We're not saying that, because there are plenty of people on the commission that don't have that type of experience. But they were willing to serve, and they've been serving, and have been doing a good job all the time. But what I'm saying is that I think you should at least provide an opportunity for the people who have been working on this commission for a while to get an idea that someone else wants to join them, and at least to meet them and talk to them, blah, blah, blah. It don't have to be a formal interview. But just enough to say, well, yeah, we think we like this guy, and he'll fill the chair pretty good. So let's send the recommendation on to the Board of Aldermen and see if, in fact, they'll agree with you. But I come from a place where I've been in politics a long time. I grew up on a block where there was a Democratic club, and I cut my teeth on doing literature, carrying literature door to door and walking around with council person or something, whatnot. And to me, ethics is very important. The process is very important, and how people get put into place is very important to me. That just because they may know someone doesn't mean that they should be placed into a position, whether it's a volunteer position, paid position, or otherwise. But I think that they should go through a regular, formal, recognized, fair process that anybody else should go through. So if you set up a standard where any candidate, any prospective candidate wants to join on any of these boards or commissions, they have a process set up. They fill out the application. It comes to town hall. The town clerk notifies, depending on which committee. And some of the applications used to have several committees on it, and they would inform that committee chairperson that they're so and so and so. They invite them to one of their next meeting. They come in during the course of their business of that night. They have them stand up, introduce yourself, and say a few words why you want to join HBC, and fine, and board may have some questions, blah, blah, blah. And if they like them at the end of the night, they'll tell the chairperson, okay, let's send our recommendation on to the Board of Aldermen. and see if they'll accept it. I mean, I think it's a fair process. You're not cutting any corners, and it shouldn't be any reason to cut any corners. I mean, you know, well, I won't say what I'm thinking, but there shouldn't be any problems in going through a fair process to get people to join our boards and commissions, committees, stuff like that.
I completely agree.
All right, so is that we know that that's Mr. Bish's desire. Is that the consensus of the board for process moving forward?
Sounds good.
So what about this appointment that we're going to talk about on next Tuesday?
What about this appointment? What does the board want to do? You want to kick it back to the HPC and tell them they need to vet this at this month's meeting?
Well, what do you think? Put you on the spot.
Well, we have a meeting coming up at the end of the month. I think he should be invited to come to that meeting, introduce himself to the other members of the commission that he does not know, and speak about himself and so forth and so on. And for this one, I think we want to table any action on this until that happens. I mean, we've been running without a person on that commission for months. So I don't see what's the hurry in trying to hurry and put somebody else. I mean, what's 1 month? You can't wait a month. And that may open up another can of worms. But I think we just table this one for now. And have them come through, have them be brought to the next meeting, invite them to the next meeting to meet the other members of HPC.
Is that the pleasure of the board to table this appointment pending introductions to the HPC, and we'll reconsider it in our September meeting?
Yes. For me.
It's me. Anything to please Mr. Fish.
No,
I'm just
You're
picking.
gonna have to live with this for the next 2 years.
I'm just picking with you.
I'm out of here.
I agree. We need to.
If that's going to be our
If it's not
process
gonna bend our
forward,
candidates.
it's
Yeah,
not-
let's start it somewhere.
But I
Let's
also
start.
want to say that I don't want the Jacqueline Jensen to perceive this as a type of criticism, because I think she's done an outstanding job. So, and I like what she's done. I like what the whole board's done, and I agree with what you said. I think that's good.
I think it's just a matter of we as a board are clarifying our process and our expectations. And I guess my question, Kyle, would us delaying our appointment to September and giving you a chance to introduce this individual to the HPC, does that impact timing of anything moving forward?
That would not impact anything. We still have a quorum. We'll be able to conduct our regular business. So we'll just wait until September.
Sounds
And
good.
I would say, on behalf of our board, please express to this individual how grateful we are for
Absolutely.
him stepping up and
Yeah.
putting his name in.
Yeah.
I think we're all very, very interested, and it's great to
It's not the
have that
personal
board
against him.
finally filled, but we have a process now that we've had a chance to clarify that, and we need to follow it.
But do we have a process now? I mean, are we establishing?
Yeah, that's
A
what we're doing
process.
right
We're
now.
establishing the process, and the process, the expectation
So that's
is
why it's tabled.
the clerk will receive the applications. Those will be then routed through to Kyle and the board chair. And the expectation is they will bring that before the full appointed boards to review and then make a recommendation to our board.
And we may need to take a look at our ordinances to see if any of this process is or is not spelled out, to that way if anything needs to be amended to reflect this, that could occur, so we could check into that. Kyle, in terms of the current board members and term expirations, do they typically all expire in a given time of the year?
Typically November, December, they typically do not meet.
Mhm.
And so
No, we mean December.
Y'all meet, and then
Yeah,
planning
the
board
terms
is
run
not.
usually for the end of the year.
Yes,
But
So-
they're like
Calendar year.
3-year terms.
right. And then
They're
they're
And
staggered.
they're staggered.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
They're a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've read the whole proposal, and I've read the whole package that was sent to us, and I'm trying to remember what I read now.
So there will be some that will come up this year, the end of December.
So I would just want to make sure that whatever process we use does not have a bit of a, in terms of a board member that's perhaps having a term expiring and how the timing of that works with
So run it by
appointing.
JDs, to be sure, all right?
Sure, yes.
And
Yeah.
I would say the other thing with those, if they're going to be reappointments that are made, they need to follow the same process, that if it's a reappointment, that then comes as a recommendation to our board for consideration. But that the full appointed boards have some review and input into that prior to us receiving it.
Now, because they are governed by state historic preservation guidelines, does that come into play at any point? I mean, are their guidelines any different than what would be done on the local level?
What I will do is I will check and make sure that if there are any applicable state statutes relating to how appointments are made, we will make sure that our process is in compliance with that.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Got more than you bargained for there, didn't you? Okay. Next item that we have, so we're gonna table that, so then we're now back on track. Item 16 in your agenda is item 16 for Tuesday night. Consider awarding residential rehab grant to Jack and Jody Vale for a facade repair project in the amount of $500. So we can either get an update on that tonight, move it to consent agenda, or we can hold that and have that as item 16 and get the update from Kyle then. What's the
I
pleasure
say
of the board?
consent
Consent.
agenda.
Agenda.
We gonna have a long day
All right,
today.
consent agenda then. All right. So then, new item 16, we've got in your agenda as written at 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Those are all notice of liens for various properties from our code enforcement department. And so again, we see these each month as a part of making sure that we recognize these liens and they get filed accordingly so we can collect on those. I would recommend that we move all of these to consent agenda.
Sounds good.
Second.
Okay? All right, and then item 22, we'll get an update on what I hope is our final change order for Park Plaza. We did prep you all for that last month, I believe, and that was related to the electrical items and then also the final structural upgrades that need to be made from the inspection that was done once everything was opened up and the engineers were able to see inside. So we'll get an update from that on Tuesday and consider that. And with that, that is everything that I have. I do not know at this point that there will be a need for executive session on Tuesday night.
I'm gonna ask for a closed session for tonight, just reference to personnel, something I need to bring to y'all's attention.
Okay,
But I don't wanna put it on the floor.
so you want to do that tonight?
I wanna do it tonight.
Perfect, okay. So with that, anything else on the agenda for next week?
I had made some notes about the Salisbury area, Salisbury corridor improvement. We need to discuss that ahead of Tuesday night?
I think we can discuss it on Tuesday night,
Okay,
because that's when we'll consider it.
okay.
Yes,
I just thought, I would like to recognize Ron Kirbyfield, even though he's
Okay.
not a resident of Spencer, he was director of communities and schools, and all of our schools benefit from that.
okay,
And, I'll recognize him as a recognition.
okay.
What was the name?
Ron Kirbyfield,
Kirbyfield.
Turbyfill, he
What?
just passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
If I wanna make just a minor change to the minutes, do I do it now or do I do
We
it?
need to do that now because we're gonna move that to the
Okay.
consent
This
agenda.
is a very mild, minor thing.
What I missed.
No, it's not anything you missed. It's probably something I missed, and I don't know if I can even add it now, but I'm gonna ask. Under recognitions on July the 13th, and we mentioned that, I made a special mention of Lori Wilson Deal, son Coleman Wilson, as well as Alderman Morgan, and I would also like, I think I mentioned, but I may not have, Lauren West, who also was very instrumental in setting it up.
Yeah,
I just
She
wanted
was
to make
mentioned.
sure she was mentioned, because she did a lot.
she was.
So we'll add that to that and
LAURENWEST, thank you.
so we'll make that update and that set of minutes, then the updated will be added to the consent agenda.
I
Okay.
guess I missed that, sorry.
Well,
Well,
I-
understandable.
I feared I missed it.
But I double checked.
All right, very good.
Uh-uh.
So with that, that's the end of our items for consideration for Tuesday's agenda. And so with that, Ms. Hovis has expressed the need to go into closed session for the purpose of personnel discussion. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, is there a second? Second by Mr. Bish, all in favor? All right, all opposed? All right, we stand in closed session.